Well, while we're waiting, why don't we go around and we usually do this at the start of every committee meeting. If everyone can go around, kind of our agenda today is just kind of going over the survey, some of the listening session items we heard, and then some emerging maps. But first, I just want to hear from everyone how things are going, kind of what's been happening in your world, your profession, as we kind of are going not just from the housing perspective, but everything that's happening in the community and kind of status update, if you don't mind. Doesn't have to be long, just want to kind of feel everything out. So, Stephen, do you want to start?
I'm monitoring on behalf of Maxwell, so don't really have any updates since this is my first meeting.
Okay, great. Yeah, we're glad to have you. Aaron, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, evictions are very, very low. So as far as that goes, sounds like won't be picking back up until the end of the year. So we'll see how that pans out after the end of the year.
They were higher earlier in the year, or just haven't seen any uptick?
There really hasn't been any uptick. There was a period there it was only for emergency reasons.
Sure.
Now it's slowing down even more, but we'll see how the environment changes and how the numbers react to that.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Thanks for letting us know. Katie? Oh, can you hear us, Katie? See, you're on mute, Katie, if you are talking. Okay. How about Tyler? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I got you. You got me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, I mean, as far as housing, I'm a realtor here in Story City. Low inventory, stuff's flying off the market. We kind of hit a little lull the last couple of weeks, but we anticipate that to ramp back up just like it does every year. School-wise, kids have gone back in full session. We have had a couple of cases of COVID at the middle school and elementary. So we'll see what happens with that over the next couple of weeks. But housing-wise, pretty steady here. We're still ramped up and going full force.
Great, thank you. Amelia, can you hear us?
I can. Good morning.
Hi.
I'm filling in for Jerry Moore, Planning and Development Director. So I'm a planner with Story County. Our department's been working on debris management from the storm. We've been working on, we have a site for folks that live in the unincorporated area to bring their vegetative debris. So that's something that's been taking a lot of focus recently with the derecho. And then, housing related activities. I don't have a permit update since I think I last talked to you all, but just some projects that may impact housing. On the Wednesday Board of Adjustment meeting, we have a conditional use permit for a new wastewater treatment plant for the city of Nevada. So that would be constructed by 2023 if approved. And then we do also have a new major subdivision, and I believe they'll be submitting the final plat for the first phase in October, which would be about 25 of the 70 or so lots. And that's just west of Gilbert, the Prairie Valley subdivision.
Okay. Great. Thank you. And Annika, can you hear us?
Yep, I can. Sorry, I was in the wrong meeting before as well. At least a few of you were over there with me. So at United Way of Story County, our partners have seen an increase or a continued increase in requests for rent and utility assistance, those emergency financial assistance dollars. I'm glad to hear from others that they don't anticipate or they're not seeing a whole lot of evictions. There's definitely a lot of folks that are fearing eviction. And so they are coming forward asking for assistance. So that's probably, that isn't much of it's much of the same, I guess, as what we were talking about last month.
Sure. Sure. Now I circle back to Katie. I don't know if you're back on or you can hear us. Oh, there we go. I see she's does not have a microphone. So, all right. She says it's been very busy in Collins. Lots going on. No slowing in sales or rentals. A couple of houses that have been on the market for a little while, but they might have some unique conditions. So, okay, thank you, Katie. So I'm going to start sharing my screen here. We have a few slides we want to kind of go over, just giving you an update on where we're at since we last met and some of the input we are starting to hear flow in from our listening sessions. And of course, now I can't get my screen to come up here. There we go. Hopefully everyone can see the screen here. I don't like doing it in presentation mode because sometimes it gets all messed up. So, so survey update. We've had it out for quite a while now, actually, and we're up around 260 or so responses. In fact, I was just gathering those today. As far as looking at the responses we've had and kind of our trends, we haven't had a lot of new responses lately. We're at a total of 266 responses, and we had those peaks in August, and since the later half of August have not had much more come in. So today we just wanted to give you an update on kind of the responses we have seen come in. I'll skip over this schedule and go back later, but we have seen come in and maybe where are some final gaps we want to start to push for to get kind of our final response tally before we gather all the results. So as far as the responses we're seeing by zip code, this is actually at least the distribution seems to be fairly kind of sporadic across the county, but we're as far as the census is concerned compared to the responses we're getting from a population standpoint. We're above, we're actually low on the Ames count, which we weren't directly advertising the Ames, so that makes sense. But we do have, I highlighted a few communities where we don't have any responses, and that would be Kelly, McCallsburg, and Shaldal. And those communities are understandable. They have very low populations. So it's not, completely out of whack that we wouldn't have any responses there. But if there are any mediums to get the word out to those communities, that might be a good target. Some other areas we're seeing a really high response from Story City. And so that's actually quite high based on their population. So that's just something we note as we go through here as far as where our responses are coming from. But yeah, pretty good distribution from all communities so far, and it's looking quite balanced from that standpoint. Just kind of, this isn't really related to distribution, but just if you're curious as far as where people claim that they work, their work zip code, we get about 50% of their respondents are working in Ames. And then the rest are kind of under 10% scattered around the Des Moines, Story County area. So just for curiosity's sake, I'd put that in there. We did hear, and we'll talk about in the listening sessions, about a lot of people working in Ames and the challenges between transportation between Ames and where they maybe would like to live. So As far as our respondents, their reported household income, this is actually very interesting because it's pretty well in line with what the census would report for Story County. So usually we see kind of a skew upwards, which we have a little bit of that in some of the income ranges. In 100,000 to 150,000 household income is around 20%, where the census is reporting about a 15% of the population, or excuse me, the Story County in that population. But otherwise, it seems to be almost within a few percentage points in each. So I would say we have a fairly good distribution of household incomes that are responding to the survey, which is good. I did see a chat come in here. I'm just gonna. Okay. As far as rentals are concerned, we do have quite a bit, and this is not uncommon. We tend to have a lower response rate on rentals than what the census would report. This is obviously a little bit skewed as well because of the student population in Ames. The census reports about a 47% of the population rents. But we still are getting about 25% of the respondents that are renters, which is actually is actually higher than what we see in a lot of communities similar, or counties, I should say, similar to Story County. But nonetheless, if you feel a need to push rental respondents more, that is a category that is low compared to what the census would report. And obviously this is broken out by the county. This is the county as a total, including Ames. I didn't pull the census data for demographics, but just so you're curious, if I know some of you are more informed on these categories than I am as far as these populations and where they may be living and working at. But our breakdown by race and Hispanic or Latino ethnicity is shown here. I think it was about 86% of our respondents are reported as white Caucasian, and pretty much 99%, or excuse me, only 1% indicating Hispanic or Latino. So I would say we're probably low on the Hispanic Latino category. We do have a Spanish survey out there, which I'll mention at the end of here. We do have paper surveys out there that those results are not included in here yet. So there may be some rebalancing when we enter those paper surveys in. As far as age is concerned, also very well distributed. We've got over 20% response from 30 and above, and usually we see a skew in age too. So this is pretty good data as far as the respondents we're getting. We got a healthy number of 60 plus empty nester retiree age categories, kind of that middle income category, 40 to 59. Or excuse me, age category as well, about that 25% range. And then the family kind of age category, 30 to 44 is our highest, which is pretty common. As far as the young professional group, college and young professional group, that is probably a low for what we would expect the census to report. But again, this does include college age students, which housing doesn't necessarily apply to in all senses, because they might be there just for college and leaving in or living on campus or something like that. So
well, and Charlie, sorry to jump in here too, but you know, we have a correlation here too, that if we pick up more renters, we'll probably pick up this age group, or if we picked up this age group a little bit more, we'd maybe pick up a few more renters. So there is a little bit of a correlation there for us too. So thinking about if there's a way to, if we do want to do some targeting things that they might be a segment we want to target a little bit.
Oops, sorry. As I click this, I couldn't zoom in anymore. I'm just gonna go with the presentation mode because sometimes I don't like it because I can't see my other stuff going on. But yeah. So that's a good point. Just naturally picking up those other categories would deal with the age, but again, not any serious major gaps that we're seeing in the survey responses. Obviously, 266 responses, I think we do need to make a final push to maybe get that above 300, just aggregate, and maybe try to catch some of our smaller communities that we had back, that I showed the response to back here, just to make sure we're doing due diligence to catch everyone that has the opportunity to take the survey. So that's kind of the update of the demographics and the makeup of the respondents. Like I said, we don't really typically on these put a hard close date, in the sense that we keep the survey open as long as we're doing the project. I put quote unquote close date for us, probably around the end of September 30th is when we're gonna do a hard data gathering, basically pull the results down and do a summary of the trends and things we see in those results for our population and market analysis report. So for all intents and purposes, if you want to advertise a close date, September 30th is a good reference point for us to be able to, to be able to start gathering those responses. So one thing about this as well, I mentioned the paper survey several times. If you have helped distribute those or had people request those, we obviously need to include those as well. So that can be as simple as scanning and emailing to us, or if it's easier to mail, we can send you our mailing address, and we can get those transferred into SurveyMonkey. So was there any questions on the survey data or things you saw that stuck out that as interesting, or I shouldn't say survey data, but survey demographics? And looks like Leanne posted here in the chat that the survey will be put in the newsletter that's published this Wednesday in the Sun. So that we should see an uptick after that gets out to folks as well. So that's great. Okay, well, I'm not seeing anyone jump in here. So transferring over, the survey is one portion of our qualitative and quantitative data gathering, public input, but the second part of that is our listening sessions, which we held, gosh, 2 weeks ago already. It seems like it was last week, but this was held September 2nd and 3rd. Obviously, we did them virtual, and thank you everyone that sent names to us. We might probably be doing some follow-up interviews after this because we had some folks that couldn't attend various sessions. So that's something we'll probably be looking to do for some of these target groups, but just kind of a breakdown of who we talked to over the 2 days. It was a very good conversation. I think a lot of different themes came out throughout the county that are some common across the county and some tailored to certain areas. So we just kind of threw down really quick some of the highlights. Obviously, we have pages of notes, and we did record all the sessions as well, which I think I need to send those to Leanne still because the file sizes, we can't send them through email. But those are available as well if anyone is curious to look through, or I should say listen or watch any of those conversations. But as far as some of the major themes that we came out of all of them, and Amy, feel free to jump in too, but I'll just kind of go top from bottom and feel free to stop or ask questions or provide more insight. We do obviously want to hear from you as far as additional details that maybe we should know about. One thing kind of right off the top, we heard was, we asked almost in every session about kind of the quality of housing, deterioration, rehabilitation needs, that sort of thing. And I would say, generally in a relatively good condition of housing is we didn't hear any really big issues as far as mass needs for demolition or major rehabilitation. Obviously there's pockets here and there and maybe 1 or 2 houses in various communities, but we did not hear, we heard generally the housing is in stable condition as far as repair and being in a state of good condition exterior. We didn't hear, obviously didn't get into, interior is not as well known. We did hear some of the rental housing condition is lower inside, and that's mainly because there is such low demand, or excuse me, high demand, low supply, that landlords are able to get away with some of those lower quality rental units. But so that's something interesting, and we will be up to, we still need to be up in the county doing a drive-by inventory that we plan to do here to kind of get our kind of external high level condition ratings as well for different areas. Another thing we heard obviously, and this, I don't think this is new information to anyone, is you know, the schools in the area are a big selling point for a lot of families and folks wanting to move and live in the area. And I mean high school, elementary schools for their children, not necessarily referencing secondary education or higher ed education. But so that was something that was very interesting to hear, and how the people want to live in certain communities over others outside of Story County, and based on where their spouses work. We also heard from a lot of communities that there has been some demonstrated housing programs that have been producing housing on a kind of sporadic basis. But there are some communities that are trying different things and testing different ways to bring housing into the communities in various different levels as well. So that's something that we're going to probably do some follow-up research or discussions with the people that are directly involved in those programs to find out a little more detail on how they are formed, and any issues and challenges, and maybe how it can be replicated or amended in the future. One thing I would say that was common, and again, this is probably not new information to anyone here, but that was common across all the discussions, was just the higher prices in Story County than the region. And by the region, I guess I mean not higher prices in secluded areas in Story County, but higher prices in Story County as a whole compared to maybe an adjacent county or adjacent area in Iowa. So we heard that, I would say confidently, in every single session that we listened to. Amy, I saw you're off mute. Did you have?
Yeah, I jump on this. I think right now we're seeing in a lot of markets, it's not unusual to hear, but the demand is so much greater than the supply that we're definitely seeing, you know, bidding on the ownership side, bidding wars, those sorts of things. So it's definitely pushing up some of those prices for a lot of people. And I don't know if it goes here or towards the end, but I think one of the big things that really struck me in talking and with communities and looking at some of the opportunities, especially around new construction, is the cost of lots. So, you know, if your final sale price of your home, and excuse me if some of you may have heard me say this, but if the final sale price of your home is, if the lot cost in that is 20% of that, you know, in your lot is an $80,000 lot, you're not building a $200,000 home or a $180,000 home on that lot. The builder developer can't make that, math doesn't work. So I think that's going to be a key point of one of the things that we need to talk about, is looking at how we're getting lot development done, specifically as it relates to potentially bringing in different price point housing than we are. It might also then correlate a little bit to different product types. You know, that to get some of those price points, we're going to have to be looking at some different product types too. I think those tie together, but that was one thing that really struck me as we were talking, is, you know, we're not going to be able to build the $180,000, $90,000, $200,000 house on the lots we're seeing currently developed in many of the communities. So If those are some price points that we would like to try to start to obtain, we got to think about some strategies around that specifically.
Yeah, and some of that kind of there's a lot of reasons we heard from many people of why they feel the prices are high, and some things we need to investigate. One of those being perhaps the regulations in some communities that require larger lot sizes or don't allow smaller lot sizes or not flexible to certain things, as well as a number of other things. But so those are the reasons for the higher prices is lot size is a huge component of that, and something we need to investigate more. And really that dives into the next point is challenges for first-time home buyers. I would say in most sessions we heard, it's people expressed for someone wanting to buy their first home, it's kind of this cycle of they're renting, the rents are high, they can't put money into savings for the first time home buyer, and then as they're waiting to save because they can't save as much, prices continue to increase, and continues to put them out of kind of their price range out of reach. So this kind of vicious cycle for many first time home buyers to get into buying a home seems to be a challenge in most communities, even going out to not necessarily Ames, but some of the smaller communities as well, which kind of leads them to look at Ankeny or other communities, at least anecdotally what we heard from people is kind of the things. And that's not uncommon in a lot of communities, but we heard a little more of that in the discussions we had 2 weeks ago than maybe we do in some counties.
Yeah, and I don't even know if I shared this with Charlie, but as we were talking in a session or finishing up a session, I actually did a little digging and was looking at median household income for households that are kind of would be our first time home buyers, which I think it's a weird break. It's like 25 to 44. It's a little bigger than it probably should be the way the census does it, but it's really high as a county as a whole. So you look at that and say, well, most of those households can afford this housing, but that is a reflection of who's living in our county today. It is not a reflection of who's filling our jobs in the county, and can those individuals filling our jobs find housing? Thus, are they not living in the county because they can't find housing and they're moving to these other locations? So I think that's where it's going to be really interesting to maybe look at some of these other surrounding markets that are people coming into the county to fill jobs, I think too. So yeah, I mean, there were in that age range, if I'm just kind of remembering off the top of my head, but I want to say there were some that were in the 90,000 a year median household income. You know, I was kind of looking by some of the communities, which gets really high margin of errors and so forth. But you know, that's they can afford they can afford some of the housing at that median household income. They can afford some of the new construction, but that's it's really high for that age range. So I think that says something about who's kind of being able to live in the county, maybe, which will be an interesting thing, I think, to dig into a little bit more. So, thanks, Charlie.
Yeah, no, and this keeps spinning into the next point, which adding to that vicious cycle that we heard a number of times was kind of the trade-off. I don't know if trade-off is the right word, but between transportation and attainable housing. So, for example, the more attainable housing may be in some of our smaller communities like Nevada or Maxwell or whatever it may be, but some of these households also need transportation to their jobs, which tend to be maybe in Ames, and the transportation is not available. They need public transit, or they want public transit. They maybe only have one car per household. So then by default, they really don't have a choice because their job's in Ames. They have to live in Ames, which puts them there at what would be more attainable housing out of reach. So we heard a lot about that in most sessions, as well as how do we connect the attainable housing to the jobs, the workforce that is working these jobs that maybe are hourly workers or more blue collar jobs or whatever it may be. There needs to be a connection, better connection between that transportation and where those housing options are at. So, and that's something that, you know, maybe it could be something obviously countywide that the county undertakes or individual cities undertake, or even the employers getting involved and creating some partnerships to that are possibilities that we, you know, kind of high level talked about with a variety of different listening sessions. But definitely one thing that rose to the top as far as one of the challenges for first-time home buyers and folks kind of either just coming out of college or doing other types of jobs is they have to live in Ames because it's near where they work. So, and that's where the higher housing prices tend to be at. So, one thing, the kind of the last 2 points here kind of relate a lot to our lower income households. We had a very good session with a couple different, two listening sessions with a lot of different groups from around the county, including those servicing lower income households and different services directed at a variety of folks in the county. So, and one thing we heard, and this is again in the Midwest, is not uncommon. I think Amy had mentioned it in a previous meeting we had, but the hidden homelessness and is around, and people aren't just aware of that because they can't see, you know, homeless people, you know, around. But there's a lot of couch surfing of folks living in their cars and different things, and realizing that it's been growing. And we got some statistics from some of the groups we talked with, and how it continues to grow, not just because of COVID, but even leading up to COVID. How there's a lot of people that need help out there to find housing, which kind of leads into the impacts of the student population on qualifying for housing programs. This is something that obviously we can't control to a huge extent, but what I refer to in that last bullet point is the median household income that a lot of federal programs use to qualify for different types of assistance are based on the county median household income, which the student population in Story County tends to drive down because students that live in Ames that don't have incomes, or whatever it may be, or just there for college, that really impacts who can qualify for these programs, because maybe they are just above that median household income range, but the housing's just not there without assistance that they need. So that's something we've experienced in other county housing studies we've worked on with college towns, and that's a huge impact that requires some more local efforts to fill that gap. So these were just some really high level themes. Like I said, we have pages of notes and things, and we'll be distilling it more down into to correlate with the market data. But anything here that anyone wants to comment on or provide more information or insight? No? Well, we do, like I said, there are some follow-up that we do want to conduct. I think there's some key people that weren't able to attend some of our listening session times that we really should talk to. So if there was anyone else that we should cover, I think we have the full list. Leanne has a full list of folks that were invited, which I think a lot of you helped populate. But please do let us know if there are other groups you think we should talk to that we should kind of in the near term here. We'd like to finish up all those discussions by mid-October or so, or so we can start getting our recommendations and items down on paper for review by the committee. So Leanne, did you have anything to add on the participants?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. I couldn't figure out how to do it. No, I did email Dr. Gray with the Nevada School District to see if the superintendents are still meeting on a regular basis. If they are, I think that's an opportunity for Charlie and Amy to maybe meet with them to get some feedback from the school's perspective. Yeah, I'll be glad to share the list with anyone that wants it, to see who was invited, or if you want to just know from your community who was invited. I agree. I would like to see at least one more session just to get some additional feedback. I know we just maybe even building a little bit more on the quality of the housing stock, if there's any additional concerns related to that, whether or not they're building code, rental code issues in communities, just from that perspective as well.
Great, thank you. So last time at our last meeting, we had showed some preliminary market data that we've been gathering as far as tables and numbers and population projections and all that fun stuff. We've started to put that into more of a spatial aspect to understand how that's spread or distributed across the county. With some of our smaller communities and population levels, we don't have the ability to get too granular in a lot of areas just because of the standard of errors and restrictions on population size. So we've kind of started to map things out and get an understanding by census tracts and block groups. And when we get building permit information in as well, we'll be able to correlate that as well. But we did want to just show you a few things that start to put this into a little bit of spatial understanding based on the data we're gathering. So these are kind of the next series of, I think, 4 maps or so are just some preliminary maps of data understanding. I have something in front of my screen here. Sorry, that's why I'm kind of struggling. There's something covering up my, oh, there we go. Okay. Starting to show maybe how things might be targeted programs when we get into that programming element in later October into November, and how some of our policies and recommendations to address some of these housing gaps might change based on the community, but also ones that maybe need more larger scale partnerships to address. So county level community by community partnerships and things like that. This map here is just the growth rate, just to kind of give perspective of where the growth is occurring, which you probably are all familiar with. This was for the past 8 years. Well, I shouldn't say past 8 years, 2010 to 2018. And this is strictly population growth. Obviously, the census tract kind of method groups a lot of areas together, but there's growth occurring across all of the areas of the county. And we're not seeing negative growth in any of the census tracts in the county right now, but most of that growth obviously around the Ames metro area, which kind of translates into the median year built when we look at kind of the housing conditions that I mentioned earlier. Most of the housing stock in Story County is relatively new as far as a median year built standard is concerned. We do kind of the north east areas, kind of that 1950s and below, maybe the before the oldest housing stock. But generally, like I said, the recent development is driving up the median year built in a lot of areas around Gilbert and Ames and those areas. So something we might, when we do our on the ground inventory, taking note of as we tour and kind of do our qualitative analysis of housing conditions in each community and where we see maybe more need for programs related to the existing housing stock. And also that median home value tends to correlate a little bit with median with excuse me, median home age tends to correlate a little bit with median home value. And the newer construction. What's interesting here is the dark green is that greater than $250,000, and this is all homes, new, existing, all living units. So that is pretty high as far as a median in that kind of Gilbert, North Ames, East Ames area for what we see in some counties, and then dropping down from there. So this is something that obviously is interesting for us to look at based on what we heard in the conversations, and it tends to line up pretty nicely with the qualitative data that we gathered in most of the listening sessions. Obviously, there's pockets if we were able to get data on the smaller group level in, for example, Huxley or Story City, where there'll be pockets of the higher value, greater than 250,000 for those newer subdivisions and such. But as on an aggregate, this is very informative for us. One thing we tend to look at, and we'll be doing this for community by community. In fact, I think last time we showed the community by community ratios is the value to income ratio. And really what this tells us, or what this shows, is the ratio of home value, median home value to household's income in respective area. And the higher that number tends to indicate a more unaffordable housing market. The lower that number tends to indicate maybe an undervalued market. So this is interesting for us to investigate more. We tend to say anything above that 3.0 range is considered a unaffordable market, and this is generally speaking. So that would be these orange and red areas, kind of all around Ames. Kind of between the two, we tend to say 2 to 3 range, sometimes 2.5 to 3 range is considered a market that is balanced for new building activity and new building construction. That doesn't mean it's affordable for everyone, but as far as market rate construction, it's an area that can be built, is desirable for developers to build in. And then when we get that under 2.0, that generally is considered an undervalued market in the sense that maybe a home gets built and doesn't get valued at a high enough appraised value to basically meet the construction costs for the developers. So that may mean these are undesirable areas for builders to want to build because they can't get the appraised value for the home that it costs them to build. So number of different things to investigate here, community by community, but it is interesting that kind of basically that whole area around Ames is above that 3 range, which we usually don't see that very often, only in, we usually see that more in more urban settings, dense urban settings, or suburban communities, or things like that. So it is interesting that whole census tract around Ames is falling in that category right now. And we did have some cost burden maps I didn't put in here just because they weren't very informative because they were grouped so highly. They didn't tell us a lot of the story. But Amy, did you have anything to add on the value to income or any of these maps?
No, I mean, and I think it's not unusual for us to see really high value to income ratios where we have larger student populations, because they tend to skew down the numbers of their incomes lower, and then a lot of times in those cities the home values are a little bit higher, so you get a little bit, it is a little bit more out of a whack, and that's why we tend to like to dig and look at other factors beyond just this. But it's a good, I mean, so Bloomington and the neighborhood, and Lincoln's a little bit bigger city, so we could have focused more in maybe sometimes in the neighborhoods around the university, but some of those locations we definitely see. It's not unusual, even in your kind of smaller tier cities and universities like the Kearney, Nebraskas and the Hayes, Kansas, where they've got smaller universities and smaller cities.
Yeah, and the one thing we heard from some of these communities when we were talking is some of them, you know, with their lot development happening, and the homes being built. One community, we heard one community, they had a program where they produced lots that or produced homes at 200,000 or below, and I'm not sure, we have to investigate a little more on how they were able to do that. But I think, you know, in these opportunity areas are maybe some of these smaller communities where we can, you know, get the more lower value or more attainable housing options, but making that transportation connection is obviously something that we have to think about and consider as well.
Yeah, Charlie, if I remember right, those were, that was, and this goes back to my lot comment earlier. We were pretty surprised at that price point, and it was specifically, it sounded like the lots were pretty much free. They were infill lots. They were infill lots that were pretty close to free to nothing. I mean, you know, very little put into them as infill lots. So yeah, they were, I about fell over when they said they brought that price point in and then clarified that they didn't have that lot cost in there.
Yep, that's right. I remember that now. So those are programs we have, you know, we likely will be exploring as recommended case studies and examples, because yeah, if you take out a $50,000 lot cost, you know, that's huge for the price of the house. And there's ways to do that other communities in Iowa and the Midwest have used to mitigate that cost and help out on that aspect. Any questions on kind of some of the data information kind of flooded you today with a lot of different things that we heard and starting to try to connect with our market data as well. Anything, questions, comments, concerns from folks?
Charlie, my only question would be, I did get some folks asking about the survey, if they lived in Ames, if you still wanted their responses. So I think some people self-selected out, but if you could just clarify.
Yeah, we're not opposed. You know, certainly folks in Ames, I think would be good if they did take it. And I'll just like show you an example of some information that might be helpful from us, or excuse me, from them. So we do ask questions in the survey. If I can get it pulled up here, I think you can all still see my screen. We do ask some questions. Well, it's going to take me a little bit to scroll to it, so I won't. I guess I won't do that. We do ask a question about if people have looked to move in the past 3 years, and if so, what types of housing they were looking for. And so I think if Ames people did take it, some of the questions are going to be very relevant to understand that maybe they would like to move to a smaller community in the county if it were available, if an option were available, or they're living in Ames because they don't have any other choice. So, and we can also filter out the Ames responses if we want to take certain categories out of the survey, and then we can reorganize it. So a long answer to your question is yes, that's fine. Ames folks can take it.
Yeah, not that to pile on, but yeah, I guess my take at where we're at right now in the process, if somebody from Ames says, hey, do you want us to be taking it? Sure, go ahead. If we're talking about kind of targeted marketing piece, it's not, I don't think there's some other communities, there's an age range, that sort of thing that we maybe want to be focusing on. If that picks up, especially if we're targeting renters or individuals in a certain age range, if that picks up Ames individuals, that's fine. That's kind of my take.
Okay, great. If there's no other questions or comments, we haven't put anything on the calendar yet for, I don't see anything on my calendar yet for our next meeting date. For October, our October meeting, we plan to present the full survey results and also the draft population and market analysis completed by that point. We were doing the first Mondays of the month at 11:30, I think, and this one didn't, we moved a week because of Labor Day, I think. And Leanne, we can talk about this, but I'm showing if we did that, we would land on October 5th, which is about 3 weeks away. If we think we need more time, another option for us is October 19th, potentially, and I could be wrong on that, Amy, but anyway, open for discussion on we can get that out right now, whether it's the 5th or the 19th. It doesn't matter terribly that much to us. The only reason for going to the 19th would be obviously it's a little further away for folks, and also would give time if we wanted to do some more listening sessions before giving the full update, and more time for survey results if we wanted to give a couple more weeks before we gather all that data. So Leanne, did you have any thoughts on either of those dates?
Of the two, the 19th would be my preference just because of my schedule, but I don't, if we get it, makes me a little bit nervous though if we delay it 2 weeks, if we're pushing the holiday schedule at all. I'll go with whatever the group says. I can make work.
Yep, and that's fine. We're, like I said, we've been doing one meeting a month, basically wherever that meeting falls. So I'm not hearing any big challenges or conflicts from anyone on the group. So it sounds like either of those dates are open.
Steve, you're the only one I can see. What about the 19th? Is that a thumbs up from you? Would that, Steve Gast, would that work for you? You shut yourself off.
Now I'm unmuted. Yes, that would work.
And it looks like, let's just go with the 19th then. That leaves the survey we have with putting in the newsletter for next week. Oh, this week. Maybe we'll get some more feedback from the survey then too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Leanne and everyone, just by pushing it 2 weeks doesn't really affect us at all. I mean, we're still going to be pushing ahead and producing material. That meeting at the 19th isn't going to hold us back from moving forward. So we're continuing on the schedule, which actually, let me pull that up here. I forgot, I skipped over that slide. As far as our schedule going forward, we're still, like I said, that October meeting, we'd be looking at our draft population market analysis and survey results are kind of our two big deliverables in October. And then through October, we'd be finishing up our inventory work and such. So we're still on schedule as far as our updated schedule after COVID delayed some things. And either way, we're still going to be producing material, whatever date we hold it on.
I say go with the 19th, then I'll set it up for the 19th.
Okay, any other questions, comments, anything we didn't talk about that we should? Okay.
I do want to quickly remind everyone, I am recording all these sessions. And if you want to go back and watch them, and Steve, since you're new to the group, this might be something you can watch the past ones that have already occurred. They're on the county's website under agendas and minutes. And if you want me to, I can send you the link as well.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
I will do that. I'll send it out to everyone.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.